Good morning. Apparently it was yellow shirt day. I don't think I've ever had that happen today. I walked in this morning and everybody's wearing yellow. It seems to be the popular color. It's great to be in the house of the Lord today, is it not? We had some wonderful singing. Let's turn our Bibles to Nehemiah chapter 4. Nehemiah chapter 4. Starting in verse 1, we're going to read all the way to verse 7. 7 verses. Yes, 7 verses. We'll be all right. Nehemiah chapter 4. And now it came about when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious and very angry and mocked the Jews. And he spoke in the presence of his brothers and the wealthy men of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? And are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive stones from the dusty rubble, even burned ones?" Now, Tobiah the Ammonite was near him, and he said, "Even what they are building, if a fox should jump on it, it would break their stone wall down. Hear, O God, how we are despised. Return their reproach on their heads, and give them up for plunder in the land of captivity. Do not forgive their iniquity, and let not their sin be blotted out before thee. For they have demoralized the builders." So we built the wall. The whole wall was joined together to half its height. For the people had a mind to work. And now it came about that Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, the Ashdodites heard that the repair of the wall in Jerusalem went on, and the breaches began to close, and they were very angry. And all of them conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause a disturbance in it. All right. So we pick up here. Last week, we had the building process begin, and we had a little cliffhanger there. We had priests. We had goldsmiths, perfumers, merchants, officials, and daughters all building the wall. Traits that you wouldn't necessarily, and we talked a long time about this, traits that you wouldn't necessarily associate with being, a rock cutter, a stone fitter, a mason, a timber layer, a carpenter. And so we pick up here in chapter 4, and all seems to be going well until chapter 4, because in chapter 4, notice, the old enemy of the Israelites return again. His name's Sanballat, and this is what he says. He becomes furious and very angry, and mocked the Jews. He spoke in the presence of his brothers and wealthy men of Samaria, and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Are they going to restore it for themselves? Can they offer sacrifices? Can they finish in a day? Can they revive stones from the dusty rubble, even the burned ones?" Now remember what Nehemiah tells Sanballat in chapter 2. You will have no right, no portion, no memorial in Jerusalem. Up until this point, Jerusalem is a defenseless city. And so all these individuals, when they need a little extra income or when they want to just have some fun, they go to Jerusalem and do their why? Because it's a large enough city that commerce occurs, and yet large enough to not have a wall, and they're easy pickings. And so these countries that are around them are happy and content when Jerusalem has no walls. But now they start the rebuild process. They've started putting the walls together. And Nehemiah utilizes the workforce that he has. Goldsmiths, merchants. And notice what Tobiah says. Sanballat says, "What are these feeble Jews? What are these worthless beings? What are these people of no account doing?" That would be one of the other ways you could translate. What are these weak, feeble-minded, pathetic creatures think they are doing? Nehemiah, that's a really smart move. Get a goldsmith to be a bricklayer. I've been laying brick all my life. I never thought of going and asking a perfumer to make the wall, but it smells pretty. But I don't think it's going to last. What are you asking to build it? Remember, before they start building, he threatens them, or as they're building, he threatens them, right? Are you building to rebel? And this goes all the way back to the history aspect of the sermon that we talked on the very beginning about the rebellious nature that they've had. And he goes all the way back, and he's giving them a subtle threat. you better stop, or I tell the king. Well, Nehemiah has already made it clear that he has permission from the king. So when your enemy can't get you to stop out of threat, what do they shift to? Mockery. Well, eventually they go to force. But then they go to mockery. You watch a bunch of teenagers. If you can't threaten them to do something, you begin to mock them into doing it. Peer pressure. It's a great tool. We ever want to have some fun with some teenagers, it's easy to make them depressed. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. But you can get them to do things by telling them they can't do it. Well, I bet you can't. I don't think you are. You get a bunch of teenage boys and tell them that they can't tear down a fence. It's not that I've tried that before. What are these feeble-minded Jews doing? Can they build it for themselves? You've got goldsmiths, Nehemiah, laying brick, laying stone. You've got priests cutting timbers. That's not their energy. These feeble-minded people are building something that will not and cannot endure because, hey, you've got the wrong set of tools. What do you think you're doing? You think you're going to offer sacrifices? You think you're going to finish this in a day? Put all the people's hands to the wall? You think that's what you're going to do? You're going to start building out of the dusty rubble or the burned stones? You say, burned stones? How do stones burn up? Well, it's being that the composition of the wall around Jerusalem is mainly limestone. If you ever want to have some fun, don't do this with a lot of people around, throw a limestone rock into a really hot fire and see what happens. Does anyone know what happens? The water inside the limestone gets really hot, it causes it to expand, heat causes the rock to expand, and the rock turns into a little bomb. So when they set fire to the walls of Jerusalem, a lot of stones just blew apart just due to the intense heat. You're going to take those stones? You think you're going to build a wall effectively with those stones? You crazy individuals. You foolish, foolish, foolish people. Now that has a desired effect. That has a demoralizing effect. Because the people inside the wall know that their primary task is not stone cutters, stone masons, bricklayers, woodcutters, timber fitters, gate makers. They know that already. And you have an individual who has been part of the campaign and the psychological campaign against these individuals now beginning to ratchet up the noise. And folks, here's the thing. Following this psychological campaign will become some physical violence. Why? Because the people inside the walls of Jerusalem know exactly what is meant by all of this banter and sword rattling. Get in line, stop what you're doing. And if we have to, we'll bring force. Notice what Tobiah the Ammonite says. Now, Tobiah is an interesting character. And just to give you a teaser for follow on, hopefully you'll show up for this sermon. Tobiah actually has relatives inside the wall. And when Nehemiah leaves to go back to see Artaxerxes, Tobiah moves into the city and has his own room and gets a portion of the temple profits. So Tobiah is a bit of an insider. And he's utilizing this inside, his being an insider to his advantage. Notice what he says. Even what they're building, if a fox were to jump on it, it would fall over. A fox is considered a very stealthy animal. Very light-footed. If that animal were to jump on the stone wall that you're building, it will fall over. Your wall is no good, Nehemiah. People, the wall that you're building is garbage. We could take your city at will when the wall goes up. Now, a couple of things that happens from that. If the wall is so worthless, then why are they worried? You ever thought about that? If the wall they're building is so easily knocked over if a fox would fall on it, then why are they worried? Or why are they angry? If it's so easy to take over, well, there's just about to be extra sport for them to take the city. They are worried because if Jerusalem builds and the wall is secure, they no longer have the easy target that they have. The Jews become a state in which they are now under self-rule under Nehemiah, where they have the ability to have a worship at their temple, unmolested by outsiders. They have the ability to have commerce unmolested by outsiders. They have ability as a nation to begin to rebuild as a people groups and are no longer under the thumbs of their neighbor. Folks, people don't like when you begin to succeed after you've been under their thumb. But more importantly, the devil doesn't like it when we begin to succeed after we've been under his thumb. He delights in a demoralized group. Because a demoralized group goes through the motions, but really doesn't do much. Let's take a look here. Chapter 4, verse 4. Hear, O our God, how we are despised. Return the reproach upon their heads, and give them up to plunder in the land of captivity. Do not forgive their iniquity, nor let their sin be blotted out before thee. Now this is Nehemiah talking. This is a prayer that Nehemiah gives. The text doesn't make that clear. It just makes a hard shift. Nehemiah begins to pray in what the technical term, I don't name them, folks. I just tell you what the name is. Get a little bit of feedback right there. This is called an imprecatory prayer. I don't name them. I just know what the names are. And an imprecatory prayer is when you pray God's vengeance upon the enemy. Now, it's a legitimate form of praying. It's not the first club out of the bag. So when you're driving home today and someone cuts you off, you cannot go, Lord, vaporize that vehicle before me. Just doesn't work that way. May the fleas of 1,000 camel infest his armpits, for he, lo, cut me off at the light. It's usually not of a selfish-based nature, which those typically are. Why does he make this prayer? Well, first of all, look at what he does. Nehemiah says that he begins to demoralize the people. You see that in the next verse. Begins to demoralize the builders. Why he is praying against these individuals is the fact that Nehemiah sees the effect that this mockery is having upon the children of Israel. He sees the fact that they begin to doubt the ability, to doubt the goodness of all. And so he knows that an attack is imminent. He knows that an attack will be coming because we'll see here in the next few verses that's what they do. Nehemiah also knows that he does not have a standing army. He doesn't have builders. He's got merchant class building walls. Guess who else is going to be holding a spear here in the next couple of weeks? The merchant class. Have you ever seen a bunch of traders fight? Probably the perfumer doing that. Anyhow. Just kidding. I hope somebody in here doesn't sell perfume. No. Little late if it was, wasn't it? The same people that are building the wall, the goldsmith, all those folks will soon be holding a spear or a sword or a shield to defend the very gap in which they're building in. The men that these other guys have are soldiers, are warriors. Nehemiah knows the fight that is coming, that the fight that will ensue, or the fight that is being threatened, will have to be fought by the men who are actually doing the building of the wall. And he also knows very much that who has been an evident and imminent within this plan of the rebuilding. Notice in chapter 1, when he asked Artaxerxes for everything, he doesn't give credit to himself, but the good hand of God was upon him. Notice that when he tells the people about God's good hand being upon him, they commit to build the wall. Here Nehemiah again goes to God for protection and deliverance against the individuals who are threatening the safety and security. But another thing, here's the thing. The mockery of the Jews in their building, while they may think they're mocking only the Jews, they're actually mocking God. Because the wall is His plan. It is God's goal for this to be built. God is utilizing the people of multiple talents. And when you mock the people of God doing the plan of God, you are actually mocking the one who institutes the plan. And so you see Nehemiah pray this prayer. Why? For they have demoralized the builders. It's a very important point. You pull this forward and you say, great, so what? Folks, we're at a very pivotal moment here. We're also at a vulnerable moment here at Skyline. We are rebuilding. We are on a grow. You have a new pastor. Things are looking up. They were building. They had a new leader. Things were looking up. What happens is the enemy does not like when God's people put their hands to the good work and begin to build and rebuild. I know the story of some of this. I know that many people in the community did not think that this church would make it after a split that has gone through. And yet it has. There are people that will still come and say, I don't think this is going to happen. You can bring in whoever. You can bring in Billy Graham. Doesn't matter. What happens? They are beginning to count against or mock against the efforts of folks in the rebuild effort. The devil does not like a church that is on the grow. And the reason why he doesn't is he would rather have a demoralized crowd of people who are more content with the hurt that they have. Because hurt people, now to use a cliche, hurt people. And it is an effective means of stagnation. And yet, what we have here is a group of folks who have hung tenaciously through a rough time. People who normally are not skilled or vested in certain jobs have been thrust into those positions and have begun to thrive in those positions, but out of necessity and need, out of what you had available to you. And as we continue to grow, we need to be vigilant because this is the moment when we are the most susceptible to attack. Because we are still salving wounds, healing spirits, healing hurts. You have new people involved, and this is when the devil likes to attack. Because this is when we're the most susceptible. And what happens is we have to be on our guard. Because if we are not, he will bring in a web of deception. He will bring in a split issue. He will bring in a culture of, I can't trust. Or he will use outside forces. Well, I remember that church. Yeah, they went through a horrible break. I don't think they're going to make it. Well, you know, you've heard there's two reasons as to why churches split up. And I've heard one argument, and I've heard this, and I've heard that, and I've heard this, and I've heard that. I've heard those too. And we can either get wrapped up in the hurt and the past and the anger and the frustration, or we can put that aside and we can put our hands to the good work. And we can build forward being on guard. Why? Because our enemy is looking for a weak link to attack. Because he likes unsuccessful churches. And they're all over this nation. You can't sling a dead cat in the South without hitting this Baptist church. So the people built the wall, the whole wall, and joined it together, half its height. For the people had a mind to work. So in this process, what worries these individuals so much is that the people have gotten the wall. Basically, the text is kind of like the height there is added, but if you read the whole passage, you see the height that's necessary, because if you build the wall, the whole wall to a point, it doesn't make sense. The word is height. For the people had a mind to work. Another way of translating that is the people had a heart to work. There was within the heart of a demoralized folks to continue the work. There was in the heart of a demoralized people to continue to press on, to continue to put their hand to the work. Folks, we remember from the long section of history, these folks just 10 years earlier saw the destruction of the wall that they had built before by the individuals who are mocking them now. That's hard to re-step back into the same plan to want to do, and then have people threatening you with physical force and ridiculing you and your building ability and your ability to do a good job at it, and also in that are subtle veiled threats. The people still had a heart to do the good work, to put their hands to making it build. That's the case with you. I have watched as I've been here. There are some very tired people who have stood in the gap here for a very long time to help this church stay afloat, to pull it together. There are some good folks that have been pressed into situations where that they probably are not the best skill, but they are still giving it all they have. Why? Because they have a heart to see this church be a force of God in this community and put their hands to the good work. Though tired, though some may be demoralized, they have not yet lost the heart to do what is necessary. You watch a lot of movies where you see a lot of the special operators, and I watched Lone Survivor. Watch it at your own peril, if you wish. You see where a lot of these men are pushed to the point where their body is at a point of physical breaking, and yet inside them refuse to break. It's kind of the imagery that's being brought here. Though tired, though beleaguered, though worn out from building, though worn out from worry, though worn out from seeing it happen, the heart of the people within them were still out in the effort to get it done, even though they're looking at the situation and hearing threats from outside the wall, and soon we'll hear how they've come up against them, and it's worrisome, and it's fretful. And we'll see Nehemiah's plan for this. Now it came about that when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Amorites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairs to the wall of Jerusalem went on, and the breaches began to close, they were very angry, and all of them conspired together to come up and fight against Jerusalem and cause disturbance in it. And say, what are these people? Well, Sanballat and Tobiah, with a more of a Samarian-based officials' army, they are in the north. The Arabs, when the Medo-Persians take over the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persians push the Arameans and the Arabs, it's all kind of the same kind of nomadic race, push them, and they travel through and they settle in the land known as the Negev. And the Negev is basically the land south of Egypt, or Israel, is what we would call the Sinai Peninsula today. So you have Sanballat in the north, you have the Arabs in the south. Jerusalem is now boxed in north and south. The Amorites are, if you were to look at the map of Israel, you would see Israel and you had the Jordan River Valley, the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and on this side you have Gilead, Ammon, Moab, and the Edomites. Ammon is on their eastern border. The Ashdodites are one of the 5 cities of the Philistine Empire, one of the 5 major cities known as Ashdod. This is where they did a lot of fighting back and forth. And so now, if you look at the map, these 4 people groups, and you notice that the list keeps growing. Before it was just Sanballat and Tobiah. Then it was the Arabs. Then it was the Ammonites. And now it's the Ashdodites. Jerusalem sits right in the middle of all 4 of those city-state powers. And they are surrounded on 4 sides. That is the peril that faces these people at this moment. And they have to build a wall in spite of the constant threat of being overrun. Sanballat and his forces are enough to give them fits. The Ammonites and their forces are enough to give them fits. And the Arabs and their forces are enough to give them fits. And the Ashdites are enough. But together, they overwhelm. There are more of them than there are the Jews. Which is why Nehemiah makes the prayer that he does. Because Nehemiah knows the force arrayed against him. Nehemiah knows what is coming against him. The people know and are motivated to build in spite. Why? Because the other alternative is collapse. Folks, there are forces arrayed against us all day. As a church, there'll be forces from outside that try to trouble us. There'll be forces from inside that will try to trouble us. We have to maintain that heart to do the work. There'll be things that will come up in your own life, in your personal life, in your family life, that will appear to be so overwhelming, so all-consuming, so all-destructive as you are trying to rebuild your life for God, as you're trying to build a life for God, that it appears so overwhelming that it's just easier to become demoralized and stop. In so doing, the devil is successful because now he has a nominal Christian. who goes to a nominal church that does nominal work, that has a nominal mission? Or do you believe in an extraordinary God who can take the feeble of people, build an extraordinary wall to exacerbate worthless individuals to the work that's being done to build a great nation, to build a great church? What kind of God do you serve surrounded by the enemy? What kind of God do you serve in the face of mockery of the enemy? I'm going to drop off here and leave a cliffhanger because next week we'll see the God that we serve. You may have in your personal life, you say, you know what, I've never known what it means to stand in the face of mockery like this, or to have people make fun of me, and be able to stand firm in my faith. I don't even know what it means to have faith. I hear these words, but I have no clue. But I'd like to know what it means for a believer to have faith, or for an individual to have faith in a God who stands with his people in spite of great trouble. You've been here for a while and said, you know, I'd like to make Skyline Baptist my home. I ask that as the praise band comes and leads us in singing, that during this moment, if you would like to know more about your life with Jesus, or to have a life with Jesus Christ, and a relationship with Him, or if you would like to join this church, if you would please come forward during that time. I'll be down here waiting. If you will please stand at this time.
Come.